Ask AI, why is my podcast not working?
It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
I don't know why. Is it really loud? Apparently it's really loud. I can trim that up a little bit. I don't know why every time it like stutters that first step now. I got to figure that one out. I don't know. I'll figure it out soon. I'm just playing with VLC. Like, I'm assuming you've used VLC in the past. I'm assuming everybody's used VLC at some point in the past.
But let's qualify that. Are you using Linux to do this audio administration?
Yeah, but that's what I've been using for the entire time, ever since we've run this thing. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
But we all know how stable Linux is when it comes to audio libraries.
Oh, come on. Anyway, so that's interesting. A friend of mine was putting together an audiobook for not really an audiobook. It was, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. I'm not that familiar with that industry, though I will say I might be getting familiar with that industry because my 11-year-old, pretty sure she's 11. My 11-year-old has written a book. So I don't know how many chapters. 23 chapters. I guess it would be. We talked about this, didn't we, in the past? Mm-hmm. I think middle grade fiction. Is that? I think that because it's not quite young adult, so it's like, not the. I'm sorry. I'm going to date myself. I don't know what young adult fiction people are reading anymore, but like Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. That was young adult when I was a kid. Actually, that was young adult when probably the people before me were kids. But, yeah. And you know what? The Hardy Boys. It always said. I forget who was the author of the Hardy Boys.
I have no idea.
But there was a name. There's a name on it, but that person didn't exist.
Yeah, I do remember that.
It was like, it was a formula thing, and there's many writers I think that wrote for that series, and they always, I want to say it was Frank something, but I don't remember. Anyway, so not quite that, but more like, I guess it'd be Boxcar Children. Does that sound about? I'm still dating myself with that, aren't I? Probably.
I know nothing about the.
Oh, really? Okay.
That sounds kind of I don't know, a little.
They were orphans, I think. Orphans that ended up having to live.
Being shipped from one place to the next.
I don't think they were shipped. I think it was like, I think they found it. It was. It was. I feel like it had a Chronicles of Narnia vibe, right? Where they were outside and they found a boxcar, and that became their place of escape, and it's like where they pretended. Or something like that. I may be misrepresenting this completely. I think my children, but that's a middle grade. It's the fiction before you get to kind of the longer ones.
Of young children thought it was safe to go into an empty boxcar.
You know what? That tells you something.
World of Narnia.
That tells you something. That once upon a time, that was anyway. Where were we? Why were we talking about this? Can we rewind? Oh, the stuttering. That's okay. Yeah, no. I'll get there. All over the place, right? That's what you've come. Our listeners understand that they don't come here. As I was told at PHP Tech, maybe the audio. I think the audio quality is better once we mix it down, but maybe the audio quality is not as good as some other podcasts. But it's the random kind of spastic topic and content switches on the fly that we didn't even know that we were going to talk about. That's what brings back.
If you were looking for a focused developer podcast, this is not the one.
No, not at all.
We will get to developer topics,
maybe,
but most often, yeah.
This is what brings back the 2 or 3 listeners we have. Is they're just like, I wonder what ridiculous things they'll talk about this week. Anyway, so a friend of mine went to school. I want to say. I don't know what the major was, English, whatever. She wants to be a writer, and she's interning with somebody who's written a bunch of books and wants to get her books. I guess this is a thing. Get them read, so they're like an audiobook, and then put them on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay, so I guess that's a thing. And so she's got like these chapters each recorded, and then basically just a title card that's going to be there. Because, hey, it's video and people listen, YouTube's not become so much video only as, there's plenty of music. There's plenty of, YouTube music kind of clues you into that, right? That they have their own app just for the music, but that stuff is still on YouTube. So it's just a title card with the reading of the book. and she was using Premiere or whatever video editing software she could to drop that still image, stretch it across 9 hours of audio, and hit render. And it took a while. And then when she was getting off of her university's computers, when she didn't have access to the computer lab, doing it on her computer, well, was a little tough because it was resource intensive, right? And I don't think you could even install Premiere on the system she had. So it was like, is there something else that can do this? And I was like, I don't know why you're doing anything, because you should just be able to concatenate the audio together and use FFmpeg to throw a still image on top of it, right? Like that's a command line thing. So came over, played around with a little bit on my desktop system. This is how we're going to get to Linux and audio, right? And it was like 9 hours worth of audio. I think took maybe an hour. It still puzzles me as to why, because it's just a still image.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about it, because you're trying to render a video with basically one frame.
I tweaked all the FFmpeg
Even
settings.
if it's like an hour-long video.
I know it's the same frame,
audio.
guys.
Yeah.
and to concatenate the MP3 files was a piece of cake, because I don't know if now I know WAV files you literally I think can just actually concatenate, but the MP3 files, like to concatenate in the one long file, it took under a minute, right? So then you get that audio, but it was telling FFmpeg just do this video or this still image for the whole thing, and I tried all the presets, like, hey, this is whatever, you can tell some presets that like I'm going to give you a bunch of still images, so don't get all bent out of shape about the compression algorithm. It's going to be pretty simple for you. Like there's ways to tune it, and it still took like an hour and some change. I'm like, what are you doing?
That would be an interesting project if you could basically write a utility script or application, command line application.
Yeah.
Basically take an audio file, take it into image, and basically just merge them together and output out a video. But it's designed for that purpose of basically one image with an audio file. And I'm curious how fast that would be.
The only tweak that we had was at the end, like 30 seconds at the end, when it's like, hey, thank you for listening to this book, there's more of these, or whatever went there, is we have to crossfade to another image. It's like an end title, but that was a piece of cake to do. And I even tested it like without the complexity of a crossfade between two images. I still couldn't figure out how to just take like no time. It's an image, it's a still image. The thing's like a couple meg, just pretend that that's it and put it on the screen. And I wonder, maybe there's not a codec that works with the container format that you want to be able to upload to YouTube. Maybe there's not a codec that understands it's just a still image, because that feels to me like where the gap is there needs to be a codec that just says, hey, I've encoded it. Now I'm just going to keep telling you it's the same image.
Well, it could also be with how FFmpeg is written, in a sense it expects every frame to almost be different. Right.
Could be like
how it buffers that one frame. It could, like, if you let's say if you write a different program for this, if you design it so that it basically takes that one image in and buffers that, so it doesn't, basically just optimizes that for that, just that one image, and just sets that as the frame for each. If you do like 30 frames per second.
Yeah.
And it should be, because the file size, depending upon the image size, will still be, that'll still be an issue. But just the processing part of it, like not need to run that through a CPU encoder each time.
Right.
You're just holding in memory.
And I even did the dash tune still image option, which is like telling FFmpeg it's a still image, guys.
Okay. That's what that parameter is for.
Yeah, there's a tune to tell it's still image, or I think you would use it if you were, say, doing a series of images, kind of like I was doing crossfading. You're just like, hey, each file here, it's nothing. Tell the encoder, here's a hint. This thing isn't changing rapidly.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we know how encoding works, right? Like take your keyframe, encode the whole thing, and then encode just the bits that change. That's why you get weird pixelization and stuff like that. And I think that just helps it say, you don't have to worry about that. Like things are going to either change a lot because we're going from still to still, like a PowerPoint presentation, or they're going to stay the same. And it still took a while. I even turned on, I have an NVIDIA GPU, and I even used whatever, I forget what the special
You're
one
on
is.
Linux and you're using an NVIDIA GPU. Wow. You're just running wild there.
What do you mean?
Well, AMD is known for having better Linux drivers and being a little bit more compatible than NVIDIA is, but it's interesting. Which GPU are you running?
Now you're gonna make me look that up. Give me
47?
1 second.
I think you said a 47, right? You actually paid a little bit of money for this one.
Well, I mean, I paid a reasonable amount of money what is it? I'm trying to figure out how to search for it in my Amazon history. But I didn't pay like the money that they used to charge years ago when the miners were taking up
Well, it's interesting. You
everything,
have
right?
usually like your like the 46, the 47, 48, right? So the 47
It's the 4070 Ti.
yeah. So that's the mid range. You got the Ti, which is a little bit leveled up from the
Mhm.
so it's nice. But then you get up to the 48, which is the 4800. That's then it's going to get to be pretty pricey there.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah, it was like I'm okay at this level.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not okay at that level. Like I forget what
Especially
it was.
you're not doing a lot of crazy gaming with this, right? You're mostly just doing for some 3D modeling, right? Maybe a little bit of gaming if you want to on your weekends.
On my Linux box. No, I just wanted something that I could do maybe some AI, not some AI stuff, some VR stuff with.
VR.
Yeah, because you could use these for like a Valve Index type of thing. So
Oh, interesting. We can
So
talk about that.
I
Wait, so
wanted.
you have a headset. Are you doing? Are you in the?
No, I
Are you
don't.
in the metaverse, Tim?
Nope.
On your Linux box?
Nope. Just
Are
something
you
that I wanted
coding
to be able
away
to.
and being a developer in the metaverse?
I have
So
seen
you have
people
your
that
headset on, and your fingers at the keyboard, and you're just like in the virtual world, coding out your
there are two
daily job.
developers that I used to interact more with. Now I kind of just see what they're saying on social media, and both of them are using the headsets with the virtual desktops and stuff.
Yeah,
And
tried that.
I am intrigued. Like, have you tried
I
that?
tried it a while ago. Okay,
Yeah?
I tried it. Was the Oculus 2, I believe, was the kind of the last one I really tried to kind of get
Okay.
into and start to use. So
Are they just up to 3 now?
it was back. It was the last version that was the wired version. Now
Oh,
they're
okay.
mostly all the wireless Oculus headsets now. So it was the last wired version. It was back when I was teaching NCC. I was using it for doing some class projects and kind of just seeing what we could possibly use it with at the school. And then I tried the virtual desktop, which is a very interesting experience. How you could have basically this full room desktop kind of right in front of you, and then you can kind of navigate around it. And there always a little bit of disconnect though, because if you're I guess that headset you could still look down, right? So if you could point your eyes down, you can still see. If you had your hands at a keyboard, you could kind of, but then you kind of
because you look past the glasses. You mean, right?
So you can kind of do it, but it was just kind of weird to use that. And also, that headset was pretty heavy, so to wear that for a good amount of time was not very comfortable.
Could you see through it?
As in,
because some of them you could like had a variable opacity, I guess, on the lenses, so you could kind of do a little bit of augmented reality.
No, it wasn't.
Okay,
yeah,
this was
a
full
purely closed in
Okay.
VR.
Okay, I'm curious about that. And that's like, because I know people. I don't know. I've seen some of the stories, like the glasses that do the augmented reality, and people just walking around with them. And it's like everybody's recording everything, and this is the worst thing ever. And you're gonna walk into a train, and maybe you are. I mean, that could happen, I guess. But
I think Ray-Ban actually is coming. I saw a YouTube video, which I should
they do
a little bit more. Actually, that's the point I think.
But it doesn't have the augmented reality, as far as I could tell. It is simply just a camera, and then they have now some whatever they call multimodal AI. So like you could ask it to help you with what you're looking at. Type of a thing.
It does not have any.
But it's not on the glasses. No,
doesn't have a display that you can kind of look through.
No.
Okay.
And that to me was the big miss. I mean, technology wise, it may not even been possible, but that was at the time. But that was the big miss with the Google Glass, right? Because to me, the promise of the Google Glass was heads up display and augmented reality, and what they delivered was tiny screen in corner. At least as far as I can remember, right? It's just like a little thing up here that you could look at. And I don't even know what it tried to tell you, but I guess it tried to tell you something. I never tried one.
Remember going to conferences or going to meetups?
Oh, and it'd all be that guy with that, right?
There would be like one or two guys wearing like the Google glasses, like with the little frame kind of in the corner of their eye. Like, and you'd be like, all right, interesting.
And would they be looking at that? Like, is there stuff? I guess you could see it. Maybe it was in, I don't know. That always, but the whole augmented reality thing to me, that's always been what seems to be like there's going to be incredible usefulness there once we get there, because the ability for me to look across something and then have it be categorized, especially with what we're doing, what we're able to do now with machine learning, artificial intelligence, however you want to phrase it. But imagine being able to look over say a manufacturing floor and actually see the problems like see like, hey, there's an alert over here on this machine, instead of it being decoupled and you're like getting a report that, yeah, machine 4 is having a feeding error, and then you're like, well, okay, let's go look at it. Like, you just look out and you see it all. It's really cool. It's also really scary, you know. You talk about conferences, that's you can see the value there, right? Look at a person pops up, there's their name. Now you don't have to remember it anymore. And here's the last interaction you had with them. This is where you talk with them last. But then if you think about, well, if you can do that, then all the things that you can do with it, and that's super scary. But anyway, as I was saying, I was able to encode videos on Linux. I don't know what you're talking about, audio problems. This thing works so great, you know? If I'm not mistaken, that's, you know, those are the render farms for all the CGI anymore is probably
if you're gonna
Linux.
do rendering, yeah, that makes sense. It was really just the audio
Just
codecs, audio
know.
libraries.
Yeah,
that was
they've
the
always-
biggest issue I had with Linux.
It's been the level on level thing, like the onion wrapper concept, because I don't know, you've got like pulse audio and then you've got this other thing, and by the time you get up to it, there's like four different things handling your audio that all can let you redirect it to different places, which is super useful. But also, generally speaking, I just want my speakers or my headphones to make sound. But like pulse audio is crazy, because you could in one box be like, set the source, you know, the source is me, and the sync is another computer, and all of a sudden start playing audio on another computer because we wrote it that way. And it's like, yes, I know you can do that, but you're serving 5% or less of your users with that feature. Anyway.
So Tim, you're on holiday today. How is this? What kind of holiday?
What a gentle segue, Mark.
we're getting back in the flow, back into our abrupt segues. I'm all about that.
Yes. I messaged Mark this morning. I said, if you can't make it, I'm okay, because I'm not tied to the desk today. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was so busy this morning that I totally ignored your Slack message.
That's true. You did.
Well, actually, that actually happened because now I'm getting so many Outlook notifications, because also I don't know,
because you're a Microsoft shop. Yeah, Outlook is.
I also don't know if you've experienced, because every time, you know, because we do like a GitHub like notifications that go through Outlook emails. So every time a PR is approved or a branch is merged into main, I get a notification by email. So usually, especially our teams that are working on different hours, I have like all these notifications are coming constantly through Outlook.
Yeah, all the time.
So your Slack notification that told me that you were available today to do the show got lost in my huge stream of like Outlook notifications. And then you said like, oh, you're on holiday today. I was like, what is this? This craziness of like company holiday towards the end of the summer. Like what's going on?
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, let's talk about email for a second. Because like you're right, and this you'll find it'll tie in. I'll tie in a second. Because there's one rule. Those of you know, I work at Phone Burner. There's one
not
rule,
a sponsor, by the way.
Not a sponsor. The reality is there's no sponsors. I mean, we are doing this for the good of you people that are listening. That's
out of the goodness of our hearts.
That's exactly right. So if you can drop I don't know, what am I supposed to say here? Like or subscribe. Tell your friends, I don't know, something like that. Find a fellow developer and share this with them, and they can scratch their head as well. But there's one rule. It's like the number one. They call it the Rydell rule because it's named after the person who founded the company. And the rule is reply to email within 1 business day. So it's like we are a virtual company, and the only way that actually works is if we can have a reliable sense of communication and know that if I ask somebody a question, they will get back to me. It won't get lost. It won't be like I have to keep asking them, and they'll get back to me within 1 business day. Now, the issue then with a rule like that is, like you said, GitHub and all these places that decide that email is the best way to send you a notification that a pull request that you once glanced at because you mistyped the issue ID, tell you all the gory details of everything that happened to it, because that seems to be what GitHub's like. They're like, hey, did you know a person made a comment on an issue that you may or may not have once looked at? And it's like, thank you, GitHub. I don't care. But that has, like, that concept made it so I have a rule in Gmail that applies a real label. It just says real to any email that comes from a real person. So I can actually filter out all the noise of this notification and that notification.
Yeah, that's good.
And because it's noisy, right?
And it seems like a Teams or Slack channel would be a much better use of for these types of notifications that come from these services that are just kind of ping updates,
Yeah.
when code changes are made. And I think that's actually we had a team meeting this week, and that was something with our DevOps messages for like either their security related or just infrastructure related, just sending them to a Teams channel, just optimizing it a little bit more. I think we probably need to do the exact same thing for GitHub because it does get to be a little bit overwhelming, even though I do see the value of from an archival standpoint, if and that's why I usually treat email as from like an archiving format. So if somebody sends a message, well, at least I know it's in my email. I could search for it.
Right.
And I could always go back to it if need be. So,
right.
And also if I want to see like a stream of messages, and it's gotten to be a little bit better because if you use, Outlook or a good email program, if there is a good threading, you can kind of collapse the messages and, it's optimized a little bit.
Just out of curiosity,
but
did you say if you use Outlook or a good email program?
It's true. Well, I'm using Outlook on the Mac and it's actually not that bad. It's like, actually, I don't mind actually because the threading feature part of it usually collapses by default. And I could just kind of go into it, and it's actually not too bad. It's really the notifications that just get to be overwhelming, especially on the phone. Like email clients on the phone, like I hate that's still like a hard, I guess, form factor for an email program, like on a personal device, especially if you're. I don't know.
I find Gmail pretty good on the phone, for me. But
well, maybe we'll talk about Outlook on the phone. Maybe then that's a different experience.
I don't even want to understand that. I have the two youngest ones are using Outlook right now for email because to set them up on the Surface devices, it requires a Microsoft account. So it's like, okay, so you get an Outlook address. Okay, instead, because I can't figure out yet how to do the Google account and actually get them to be part of the family, since I'm a bigger family than Google understands exists.
Well, you're an educational institution right now.
Apparently, I am. Yes.
That's what happens when you develop a family and start a homeschool, and so you could just get all the educational discounts.
Yourself. I should sign up for a Google EDU account or something. See if
you could be getting JetBrains product. Just say your kids code, and you could like get all the free IDEs as part of that.
We did the first Fusion class. That was interesting to try to do. And my oldest son, who has, I don't know if I mentioned on the show, has definitely got into bushcrafting YouTube. Right? Like the YouTube that's everybody's building their own shelters out in the middle of nowhere and teaching you how to survive and things like that.
Planning for the end of the world. How old is this? How's your son here? Like, is your son like 5 years old, or think the world's going to end? Like,
no, he's
building bunkers and like he's stocking up.
He's 9. So he's not a 5-year-old. He's not. We've got a big field out back, and he's dug a hole there, and he's put some tree branches in different places, and he's built himself a shelter.
You can take his Hardy Boys book in there.
There you go. There you go.
All set for the end of the world there.
So, but he's got this little box, and he's got I don't know, a handful of lighters, some a ferro rod. He's got his strike anywhere matches.
Make sure he doesn't burn down the field. Man,
I know, right? Yeah. So there's that concern, but he's got a box, and he comes to me with these lines on a piece of paper where if I can make a divider for this, then it would hold this here and hold that there. So we quick drew that up in Fusion, printed out, and he just stuck the divider in his little box. So he's able to build something. But that's email. We're talking about email,
and also I was asking about the company holiday.
I know we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. Yeah, no, I mean, we've talked about this too, right? So I think it was probably a carefully sanitized version, but and we talked on the show about the unfortunate FCC notice that impacted PhoneBurner in early 2023. We talked about that. So last year, as kind of a way to take a break and just appreciate and remember and just be thankful for the fact that we all work really hard to stay a company. The company decided to make the 4th Friday of August a holiday. Just tell everybody, hey, take a break and just remember how much we appreciate each other for staying together and getting through a really tough time. So
kind of a reminder of a hard time the company went through.
Then
it's good. I like that. It's good.
So that's what we've got, the 4th Friday of every August. And I think probably some August, it'll basically make a Labor Day into a very long weekend.
Hmm.
But here we've got a
Which-
3-day weekend. The next week we'll have a 3-day weekend
Which
the other direction.
makes sense because I actually know a few guys at my company who just took off just towards the end of the summer. I know one guy's like camping right now for the
Yeah.
weekends like that. So the kind of end of the summer, it's kind of a good.
Yeah, it's a nice place to have those extra days. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, that's why I'm not in any meetings, not working today. So that's nice.
Also, kids going back to school too. So if you were going to be taking your college student back to college, this is the weekend to do it. So,
Is it?
or last?
I guess it
weekend,
is. Yeah, yeah. I know.
This week and that, or I guess most colleges, if they haven't started already, will be starting next week. So, yeah.
I know our Hamburg High School started Wednesday for some reason. I don't know why you started in the middle of the week, but they did. And did we talk about this last week? I forget. The local high school has a 6-day schedule. Have you ever run into that?
Only internationally, but that's kind of interesting. So why are they doing what does that 6-day look like? Is it
Right.
like a half day or some type of
No. It's so like, yeah, and that's the first, because you're thinking like 6 days of the week. It's not 6 days of the week. It's a 6-day schedule where you go to school 5 days of the week. So it's a class schedule. So like for like a music class, you may have that on like day 2, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So you have this.
I know what you mean
So
by
it's
that.
it's a
Yeah.
recurrence schedule thing, right? But that means then because there's only 5 days in a week, it means this thing is constantly changing,
Mhm.
which is fine for people that go to school every day, because then you just look at the day that, what was the last day? Oh, yesterday was a 2, so today's a 3, so it's my 3 class schedule. But when you're just going for some of the music programs, like my kids, that is impossible to model in a recurring event on any calendar that I've ever found ever. Like I've other schools do it because there's like articles on how to put the schedule into Google Sheets and then export a bunch of CSV that you take to this other tool to create the invites to the calendar, because no calendar can support this concept.
There is nothing better than thinking about a better way to design a calendar.
Oh,
And
really?
also, well, I'm thinking like just to think about, right? So because everybody has calendaring, scheduling issues, right? Especially if you have a family or or trying to balance between work and family, and say, could you have a nice calendar that could do a nice merge between the two, or just for scheduling purposes. But then if you actually go and try to develop a calendar, it's one of the worst developer experiences you could ever have in your life.
Have you ever read like the specs for the recurring rule, like the R rule specs that are kind of supported by most calendars?
No, but I remember it was probably a good 15 years ago when I was working. I think the first calendar application I designed for, it was actually back in the first one I made was back in Flash. Remember Flash, Tim?
I remember Flash
with some action script.
Yeah,
I was doing a help desk application.
Macromedia, right? Macromedia.
So
Flash?
I built this help desk application in Flash because back in the day, Flash was the hot thing to do. And it was kind of like I was kind of into it. I was doing some action scripting, and it was and for an application, because it kind of works sort of like a Java applet, because I had some experience building Java applets. So I was like, I don't know what to do this as a Java applet. Why don't I do this as a Flash application? Because you have the Flash plugin, just install in a browser, and it could be a nice kind of encapsulated application for a help desk kind of style of application. So I had to build a calendar feature or scheduling feature as part of that, because if you're going to be putting in a ticket or a support request, and you want to specify when the date when that ticket is put in, and also be able to put when it is due or is completed, or have like a schedule, I had to build a calendar feature as part of that. And that was a huge hassle. And then down the road, I did another calendar application for a kind of a similar thing, like with a sort of a ticket document tracking style application, ASP.NET. I was able to use a few libraries that did most of the UI work, but still integrating with that is always just a pain. So definitely multiple times of being able to design and build calendar applications, which I always go back to thinking like, oh man, it'd be so nice to kind of design like the perfect scheduling calendar for me and my family, for my work, and just be able to kind of merge, because it's always also an issue too, trying to balance your schedule with work with your family and be able to kind of navigate between, usually two totally separate calendars. So I always come back to that, but then I always remember like the hard trials that it is to design your own calendaring application.
Oh, and because I think somebody didn't have their calendar permissions set up right or something, and they were showing like everybody the details of all their calendars. Our shared calendar, or like the work calendar, settings got to be that you can't share them externally. The only thing you can share externally is busy free. So I used to be able to share my work calendar with my personal calendar and manage everything from there. But now it's two separate calendars. And yeah, you're right. That's a pain because you got to like, unless I bring it up, I can't do it through the web interface of Google Calendar. I would have to actually import them both into a application calendar to see them together. And I just like for calendars, I don't run an application calendar. It's like, it's got to be
spit up a quick little PHP application with a little bit of HTMX in there, and it'd be done, right?
Yeah, no, piece of cake.
That's what PHP is for, right?
Though I've had to deal with the recurring rules and understanding them and parsing them and figuring out the complexities of that. And it is.
What was that for? What type of project was that for?
I think it was some stuff. I think it was some. Well, we've got a calendar support phone burner, so you can do schedule appointments and things like that.
But you don't work on the UI. You mean you were working from a
I'm just talking about like say it's like you want, well, this occurs every Monday at 3. But by every Monday I mean every other Monday, except for the Monday on the 23rd. And then that there's a spec for that, and it's this R rule thing that is all text, and it has like except for this one and this exception and that. And I was like, when we got the 6-day schedule, I'm like, I don't know, does our rule have a way to express that this thing repeats on the second and third and fifth, or second and fourth and fifth, or whatever it is occurrence, but only on weekdays, and it doesn't. But I was hopeful. I was hopeful that it would.
Well, going back to your issue of the 6-day schedule, because I was thinking, couldn't you just do something where if you just did a little bit of an offset, and if accounting for, I guess you'd still have to track how many days are in a month, and then be able to.
Oh, I used code to generate an iCal file that had all the events there, because like iCal is pretty much the standard for that. And it's like you got a vstart vn, like, so it's just a text file with a bunch of so I generated an iCal file that I then imported into the calendar, and it has the schedule until there's a snow day, and then everything changes. But there's no way to express it with recurrence in a way that makes it like, oh, I want to edit the invite, because that's the value of recurring events, is when you edit one of them, you can hit the button that says edit all, and when they're all individual invites, there's no way to edit all. So yeah,
fun times with calendars.
Calendars are maybe I'll figure out something. I only did the first semester, so maybe I'll figure out something better for the second semester. We will see. So, well, what have you been working on that you can't talk about?
What I can't talk about? Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I know. Usually coming to this show, I usually had some interesting things to kind of say, oh, I was thinking about this or working on this. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Well, yeah, I know, because I could talk about something interesting about refactoring and talk about, next versions of a platform or system, that's what we're talking about this week at the at our company, and kind of thinking about I talked about this past, how we are working on a transition as we're kind of transitioning away from the AWS professional services and working more internally. And so we're starting to think about, what does that next version of the platform look like? And how are we, as this internal team is going to take it over and start to develop that next version, and what type of features should we kind of focus on? So that's always an interesting conversation, because it's interesting too, if you use, let's say, even if you do this internally, let's say you have like one internal team and maybe it's handed off to some other developers, or if you are using consultants and they kind of build a platform for you, then it's handed off to some other developers to kind of manage and work on that. How much should be maintained of what's been written? Because you do have a good amount of value within that code, that infrastructure, everything that's established. And it is, let's say it's working somewhat efficiently, but then you want to start thinking about, okay, is this going to scale? Do we want to add more features to it? And then how much refactoring should we do to the system that we maybe paid a lot of money for? You know what I mean? Because there's value in that. There's a monetary capitalization value to that. So interesting, like thinking about how balance out of like when do you make choices about when something should be refactored or when something should be rewritten to go to that next version or the next iteration of that platform that you're working on. You kind of any experiences kind of working with like kind of balancing between keeping, current infrastructure, current versions, or when you think about, making the next evolution? Because it's something that we're going through now.
I guess it's always the question as to why. Like, what's the benefit of this? What's the
Let's
value?
how about for just for scalability? Because that, let's say you have a certain number of customers, certain number of clients or users on your system, and let's say within 3 years, 2 to 3 years, your goal is to get up to this many users or this of the system, and that the current infrastructure might not support that as well. Then you may want to scale it, and you might need to refactor some parts of that. But then how do you start to schedule that? How do you start to kind of plan that out?
I mean, that's something that I would hesitate to really start on. This is going to sound maybe, I don't know, some people might not like this, until you actually start seeing the beginning of those scalability issues. Because one thing I've said more than once to groups of developers is tomorrow Tim knows a lot more about how to solve this problem than today Tim.
Mm-hmm.
So we may look at the future and say, I bet you if we had this many customers on this, or not even I bet you, I know this many customers on this will create an issue with this code here. But we don't have that many customers on that right now, right? So instead of borrowing the scalability issues of tomorrow, let's just be aware and kind of know, all right, if we needed to solve that, do we know what we would do? Yeah, we probably do something like this. All right, maybe document that someplace. But unless you're actually sitting there twiddling your thumb saying there's actually nothing for us to do, and that's rarely the case, right? Like, because usually there's actually a pressing need somewhere. Yeah. There's actually an issue that we're either running into because, hey, users have asked for this feature, or this part of the application is actually underperforming right now. It's taking too long for it to load for some of our customers. That's where we should put our focus, because who knows? Who knows if that feature, whatever it is, right, will still be something customers want by the time that you have that many customers.
Or if you feel some type of immediate performance need, like we talked about this last week, we kind of alluded to our last week's show that if you want to hear about database performance, that was something that we talked about. So if your reporting is slow, or your queries are just not optimized, or just because the database size has gotten to a size where maybe you need to start considering not refactoring the database, because most often if you start to do that, that could start to also cause some more issues. But how can you start to maybe move some of that data in different places to start to optimize, especially for different reporting and different queries that you think you're going to be doing, just to make that a little bit more efficient. So if you start to feel a pain point there, thinking like that your data is not moving efficiently through the system, or you're not able to access it as well as you could, then maybe that would be a good opportunity.
Yeah. When you see like, hey, there's a couple of our customers that are really big, or they have large sets of data here, and it's slow for them. We can't run the report, or they can't run a month report. They have to run a week report, just because it takes too long. It times out running the month report. Cool. Then at that point, I'd ask a couple questions. How many customers do we have like that? Right. And how many customers do we think other customers are going to get there? Right. Like, are these outliers, or are these the people we're chasing? Like, do we want customers like this, or is this happening because they've been here for so long and everybody else is going to get to their point eventually, and then that gives you a little idea of, if it's two way outliers, it's like, we have no other team that uses the software this way to create this much data. Then sometimes it's like, okay, I'm sorry, it's not going to be the greatest experience for them. And those are just the decisions you have to make from a product standpoint to figure out where you put the energy and effort that you have.
Okay, now I remember also something I could talk to you about. That actually came up. This is something too I'm starting to think about myself. We were talking a little bit about as an internal team. We started thinking about too, what could be some additional tooling that we could start to build on top of the platform to give us better reporting, better observability. Also, if we want to manage our processes or data pipelines, and be able to have some custom tools around. Because right now we're primarily just using the AWS console, using some third-party software for observability and some management. But how can we start building some of our own custom tools on top of that? And since I am a full stack developer, Tim, and most of my experience, well, it's interesting as I go back between being a database developer to being a front end developer. But if I look at my career, most of my career is probably more from the front end standpoint. So I'm starting to actually think about, all right, Tim, I got to start building maybe some front end applications. Start getting into that. So what type of stack should I use? Especially if I want to start building some small utilities, some small tools. Definitely going to have a front end to it so that we could, that's our DevOps. Mostly it's going to be for our DevOps teams to be able to manage, some process. Maybe eventually it would get to be for observability reporting for maybe our business users, but initially it would just be more for our team, our DevOps team. So what stack should I use? I have been considering going back to PHP because I'm thinking about what would be the benefits of going back to using a server-side language and keeping it simple as possible, right?
Well, yeah, like without probably going into details that you can't go into. Are we talking like?
And this is just me randomly thinking because I haven't really talked about this yet with my team. So I'm thinking about like I'm also starting to think about I'm going to maybe test this out with building some tools for myself. Some things I'm seeing that I would like to maybe automate or optimize in my personal workflows within the platform as I'm kind of building and maintaining. I could build like a couple front end pages for better observability of the things I'm working on personally. And then what I was thinking about doing is let me just approach this from the most simplest way possible. And what is one of the most simplest stacks I could use? Just go back to just PHP.
It's like those simple
HTML,
PHP developers.
CSS,
I mean,
maybe a little bit of JavaScript. And honestly, I might go into the HTMX. I know I poo-pooed the HTMX a while ago.
It depends.
But if I want to,
everything depends on what your use case is.
If I want to keep it as simple as possible mostly if I want to keep the front end layer as simple as possible, because I will be accessing a lot of the APIs that either we have already implemented or that be looking to kind of keep within a similar infrastructure that we're already using. And so keep it heavily API based.
So would your client side code hit your APIs directly, or would you be proxying through like a PHP layer because you wouldn't have the authentication in the browser?
That would be interesting. I would have to kind of think about how would I want to, because we would just be for internal purposes.
Right.
So it would be on that's interesting because we have to kind of think about how I'd want, because I'm thinking if I'm going to run this as these PHP applications, I have to run them in a container, right? So maybe like a Fargate, some type of serverless container infrastructure, right? I don't know if I really want to be running this in a Lambda function. Throw a PHP runtime inside of that. I guess I could.
Yeah, you could, but the warm up time on that.
Yeah.
But I guess at a high level, like, what are we talking about? Like green light, red light? Like, hey, here's a thing, a pipeline, a workflow, or whatever, and it's however we observe success. It's success. It looks good. Or yellow. I don't know. Something looks strange here. Or red. This is totally not happening.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the simplicity of?
Yeah. It wouldn't be the complex. So, one of the things we really want to have, and you probably, or every company has this, is like, especially if you have a lot of data pipelines or watching data, move through the system, having good observability of that data. So, especially if that data transforms at different points in the system, just know where that point is, where that transformation occurs, was it successful or not? And, just having a better state management and state history of the data, that's something that we definitely want to work on and have that. And and there are some third-party tools that start to provide that type of observability. Yeah. But the more custom your pipelines are, especially as more domain specific they are to what that data is and what it looks like, it's kind of hard for a third-party tool to model, or you have to customize a third-party tool or configure it to really work the way you want it to work. So my idea is thinking about, let's build some custom tooling around this. I think it's just going to be a little bit more efficient, trying to keep the tooling also as light as possible. So that's what I was considering just going to, is back to a simple, in a sense, a simple LAMP stack. When you probably you're not going to use MySQL, but just use a simple, PHP, a little bit of HTML, JavaScript with some HTMX. Keep it as simple as possible, because most of it would be. What would be the best uses of using PHP to, what type of data would I want to pull in for that? Or should I just use PHP as like a templating rendering engine, for the pages? It's a good
rendering engine. But when you talk about like what you're talking about, my immediate thing is like, I know how to solve problems with code, but don't want to solve problems that have already been solved, right? Like that's
Mhm.
sometimes you do. I mean, sometimes it's for like the fun of it, but like, isn't there something out there already? Like
Well,
Grafana
like I
is what
said,
comes to mind for
there
me.
is, but you have to do a lot of work to customize, but depending on how custom your workloads are
Yeah, but is that actually
and what
like,
your
wouldn't
data
you
looks
be,
like.
yeah, wouldn't you be doing the same thing with whatever you build to get that data back in, and in the effort to say to capture the data? I don't know. It just feels like
I don't want to
I
capture the data. I just want to capture
no,
like
to capture the reporting. I
the
mean, the
state of the
analytics.
data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. To capture that, I feel like by the time you've done that to put a red light, green light on your dashboard, well, that's the same thing you would have had to do to put a red light, green light on a Grafana dashboard.
Possibly.
And
Possibly.
this and the same, and I mean like, I think Grafana is open source, right? Like, so there's got to be ways to run your own custom scripts in that.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I would tend to be like, I think dashboards have been solved. It's the
Yeah, it's
it's
not
the
just
connectors that maybe haven't been solved, and
yeah,
I'd
it's not,
focus there.
and I'm also, it's not just for dashboards too. So having a little bit of interactivity too, so that we could say, okay, so if this eventually we're going to get to it. So if this
Okay.
pipeline failed, or there was an issue with it, or just some data was just misconfigured, or just some alignment, so we could kind of do some reloading, some management of that. Which right now we have to do is go into the AWS console and be able to basically manage it from there.
So like kind of like a try again concept, right?
Which, think about, the AWS console is, love it or hate it. It's definitely, once you get used to it, it's very, it's very functional, very usable. As long as you know what you're looking for and how you want to kind of work with it. But we also, from, let's say, a business user standpoint or a DevOps user, say, do we really want to have everybody log in touching the console all the time?
No.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, of like having better tools in place that doesn't require somebody to log into the console to be able to basically access some common functions that they would need to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I guess if this was a problem that I was trying to solve, I'd spend a good afternoon digging through things like, existing dashboards and look for, does their plugin architecture support something that says, hey, you could press this button and it could execute, I don't know, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like it could make a webhook, and then it could even have feedback from that it bubbles up. It's like, as long as you have those kind of, customization points or API points, then it's like, I'm gonna use this, and we will just write code that leverages it. That's probably the direction I would start to head down.
But then you are also, I know it's like I said, you're not reinventing the wheel. Then you're just maybe modifying a little bit or configuring to your use case. But also you are introducing another third party or specific dependability that
says the guy who's working exclusively on AWS. But yes, go ahead, go on.
Maybe that's why I wanted, like, for like some tooling, I want to lighten it up a little bit. Kind of make it a little bit more modular, make it a little bit more.
Wait, can you just throw all this data at QuickSight and it could just give you a button or something?
Well, if you're going to be doing, actually, interesting. The interactivity is kind of limited when it comes to QuickSight.
Is it?
Yeah, you could. I think there is, because that's something we did take a look at. Thinking, like, because we use QuickSight a lot, like for just reporting dashboards, and our business teams use that. They configure their own dashboards with the data source. Like, we'll set up the data sources for them, but then they'll configure how they want the dashboards to be. How to.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you point at this set of data, and then I say, I want to see it by customer, and I want to see it. Like whatever your.
Yeah, I don't do much actually. Personally, with our team, we don't do too much with QuickSight, but we set up the data sources for them. So they'll come in, they'll say this is the data that they need, and they're like, okay, then we'll figure out what's the right database where that data is already located, and should we?
At times, do you have to do like some? I'm not going to use the right word, but like pulling from multiple sources and kind of making a new one and be like relating.
Well, they can do that too. That's
okay.
That's the nice thing about QuickSight. You can kind of merge multiple data sources
as long as your keys are unique. Or consistent. Like as long as a customer ID here is a customer ID there.
Yeah, as long as you can do the correct mapping of how you want the data to be linked, then it's pretty user friendly. Actually, I do like QuickSight for that.
Yeah.
But from an interactivity standpoint, it is kind of limited.
Right. You wouldn't have buttons to say retry or anything like that. It is strictly like, here's your data.
So. But Grafana, I've played with that a little bit. I should probably get into a little bit more, because I bet it probably does have a little bit better tooling for that. Maybe some better hooks you could probably wire in for that. But like I said, I was kind of thinking, if we want to make some light utilities that we
Yeah.
that we could basically just run in containers, within the infrastructure, and we mostly for internal use.
That's okay. So now you got me thinking a little bit. The like the button that would retry, that feels like a Lambda function, right? Because you don't care about spin up
Yeah.
time on that. You're just like, I hit a button and we'll look back, we'll get feedback from this. You know what you should do? The success or fail should be an email to your inbox. That's what it is.
Another email. The perfect notification system.
Yeah. There you go.
No, it did get me to start to think this week of like, could I do this, coming into this new job, I've, the past few years of spending a lot of time with React and like with these large JavaScript frameworks. We still use, we use TypeScript and Python as a primary languages that we use for, because we work with the CDK, and all of our Lambda functions are either written in TypeScript or using Python. But thinking about if I would really want to start building just some small applications, small utilities, do I really want to go back to React, bring in, build it out as using this huge JavaScript library framework? And when I really just need like a page to get rendered, I need a little bit of JavaScript to call out to some APIs and pull some data back. And
that's
and
your
have a little bit of
HTML, right?
interactivity. Yeah. So that's what I was thinking about. So.
And that's the thing. Like you can look at HTMX, and when you look at it through the lens of a very complex web application with lots of moving parts, you're probably going to say that feels like a step backwards. It feels like a lot of effort to get rid of what is a bunch of Ajax calls, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it from the standpoint of, I've got a one-page app, and I just want a handful of the parts of it to be kind of dynamically reloaded upon user interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it may be a perfect fit. And that's the thing. Like we tend to sometimes look at newer technology and want to, think like, well, it should work for everything. It's not. It's never going to work for everything. It's going to work for what it works for, and it's not going to work for the things it doesn't work for. And it's finding. It's like that's really one of the biggest jobs of a developer.
Yeah,
is knowing what works for this problem, and knowing what doesn't work for this problem and why not. Yeah.
That's what I was also thinking about, approaching this from the most simplest stack possible.
Yeah.
In a sense where it doesn't take much work to get set up. Really, honestly, most of the work's gonna be setting up the container.
I like how he's also keeping the simplest stack. I mean, you can't get simpler than PHP.
Well, that's what I mean.
Because even PHP developers can understand PHP.
No, but if you really just, and really what I'm thinking about using PHP for is really just a rendering layer. Instead of rendering JavaScript files as like outputting out HTML based, just using PHP.
Why can't you use HTML?
Unless you want to, I don't know, because if I'm going to build out like an application, even if it's a small utility application, I like the reusability of like templates. So if I wanted to, break it out, like as in like your at minimum, like your header and footer and your body area of the page.
Okay, so
then you could kind of reuse those parts between your pages, but then you're going to have to start bringing out components within those pages for maybe for different views for reusability. So that's what I'm thinking about from a rendering layer, using PHP instead of a JavaScript layer to that.
But depending on how, I guess, because you want that to be on the fly, you wouldn't be able to pull that off as like a statically rendered site.
No, it wouldn't be. That's why you'd have to run it in a container. That would always be running. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, like, why? If you're doing templates, and if your JavaScript is connecting to your APIs, then you could just build it and have a static site, because you could. Like, that's your template answer,
and
right?
That is the benefit of using like a framework like Next.js or React, where it could basically give you a SPA, a single page application. That's the benefit of that, where it basically just, it's rendered out as a single page application, host on S3 bucket, and then just deal with making your API calls with JavaScript. And
as long as you can do, as long as you're within an environment that those calls are allowed. And that's the interesting thing. Because to me, like where PHP would fit, in my opinion, well in that model is as the glue between whatever your services can tell you and the business logic to understand, is this red or green, right? Because then you have a very,
if you want to do any processing between the two, if
you're like, well, we've got all these APIs, but when we really say, is this workflow healthy, What we mean is check this API and see if you get back a response that kind of matches this one, or like has some shared state. And you're like, okay, so that's success state there. And then you got this one too. And if any one of those are broken, then we want it to be yellow. If all of them are broken, then we want it to be red, those type of things. And instead of putting that logic client side, putting that logic server side, I don't know. To me, just feels like a more natural place to do it. Because I've always felt
you
like
may have just talked me out of using PHP, Tim. I think this maybe I just need to go back to just building my static spa applications. Render, do my
because you don't need that intermediate step there.
No, my MPX build and build my Next.js site. Just go back to doing that. I don't know.
See, that's what I'm good for. I'm good for talking people
talking people out of PHP. I think that could be a great keynote that you should work on.
Oh yeah,
when you should not use PHP.
When you should not use PHP.
That should be at the next PHP Tech.
You know what? I don't know if John and Eric are listening to this, but if they are,
they definitely aren't.
I'm good. They definitely aren't.
Eric definitely is. He hates
Eric. He hates. That's right. That's right.
He loves you. I don't know what he thinks about me, but he definitely hates this podcast.
It has got called out a couple times over on PHP Ugly, hasn't it? I don't know. I should clip the times that they've mentioned us.
John's a good, nice guy. I think he loves you. I think he likes me. I think he can kind of say, oh, their podcast is cute. It's okay.
It's cute.
But Eric's like, they're bad.
They're the worst.
Horrible.
They're the worst.
Don't listen to them.
You don't want to go to that PHP or that the Dev Friday show. Stay over here at PHP Ugly. I need to clip some of their commentary, and we'll.
We could turn our show into. We could be like a PHP Ugly commenting podcast. I don't say this would be the only thing we do, but maybe we should have like a PHP Ugly segment where from their last show or from the last week, they'll say something crazy. We should clip it, replay it.
Okay.
And then let's give our opinion about that. And maybe that'll give us a little bit back and forth, and we'll kind of pull them in a little bit more. That's
interesting. What's also interesting is it says, okay. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just distracted because all of a sudden I realize like on LinkedIn, it doesn't show that I'm streaming. So I don't even know. Is this even going anywhere? Is anybody listening to this?
Well, as long as we're recording, and honestly, nobody's listened to us anyway live anyway. So.
No, actually, I could see it. It's just not, for some reason, it's not showing up in the banner on my LinkedIn anymore. I don't know. So, but yeah, that would be a direction to take the show. Was there something they recently said that you'd like to talk about in the 2 minutes and 47 seconds we have left?
Well, just the question I asked you is like, when would you not use PHP? That would actually be an interesting question. I'd like to hear their opinion about.
Okay.
When would they choose to use another, let's say, server-side rendered language, or not use a server-side rendered language? That would actually be kind of interesting. Especially for developers who use PHP all the time. And
so what you're saying is we're positing a question here.
Mm-hmm.
They're obviously not listening, but I could send the question to them, and then they could have absurd reactions to it on their show. And then we could discuss that on our show. Is this the content loop that we're looking for here? Pretty much. The
one thing that drew me back to think, or that didn't drew me back, but just made me think about, should I go back to using PHP for this use case that I described?
Yeah,
was because of its simplicity. And
he keeps leaning into that word, those simple PHP developers. No, but you're right.
When I say simplicity,
you can do anything with it.
When I say simplicity, I mean mostly from a front end rendering standpoint, as in like, if I just want to have a simple modular front end application, a few PHP files and reuse those files between it gives me that ability. For me to just do that with static HTML files. Remember back in the day you could use what is it? It wasn't server-side HTML.
Server-side includes, yeah.
Server-side includes, yeah. Remember that?
Yeah.
That kind of could give you a little bit of what I'm talking about, but
as long as and then you had the front page extensions. Remember the front page extensions for Apache that would do essentially the same thing?
And then Cold Fusion took over then, because that's what they basically became Cold Fusion.
And now the world, I think we all write in Cold Fusion because that's how well they did. No, I think this is an interesting direction. No, but really, honestly, like you're right. PHP is super flexible.
Or light. Maybe we should say light.
It just is. It can be. You can do complex things with it, but you don't need to start with the complexity. Yeah. You can have an index.php that does some very simplistic stuff. So it's a great language for just prototyping an idea, and then also being able to take it to the next level if you want to. So Alrighty. Well, we've got 40 seconds left here. Are we getting a new site sometime, Mark?
Oh, is that? Are you gonna start a? Oh, do you need a new site?
No, I was just saying, like, are we going to get, like, are we going to update devfridayshow.com to, like, pull in text file? We were talking about that.
We probably should. We got to get back to that. Now that we're back online with doing this on a weekly basis, yeah, we gotta start thinking about that.
Built entirely on AWS. The entire show is just one big pipeline.
And the big question is, will we be using PHP or will we be using JavaScript?
Well, it's going to be serverless.
Because right now it's JavaScript.
Yes, it is.
And maybe that's what I was talking. The reason I brought this up. I feel living a little bit burnt about the large JavaScript frameworks.
Oh yeah,
just a little bit tired. I'm like, do we really need them? I'm like, I don't know. So I am. Like, I love JavaScript from a front end standpoint, and honestly, I don't mind it from a CDK with TypeScript. But I'm like, do I really? But if I'm going to build like a small website or small application, do I really need to use like a full JavaScript framework?
We use Vue, and some of like the upgrades stuff with breaking changes. It's like, this is a full-on framework, guys.
Yeah,
like,
it's a liability. It's a dependability. Yeah.
I mean, at the same time, though, I get it, because you want to go there, you want to hit the little button to expand, and then you want to see all the data that you didn't load in the page because it could be a lot of data, right? Then you want to collapse that and expand the next one, and like you want these things to run effectively as client side apps, which is, I mean, that's a different talk. It's like, this is what MVC was. The idea of the web browser within full running app is your view, your controller is your web head, that updates, then your API is kind of your responses is kind of like your model layer, and keeping that in state, because like you have state now in these JavaScript apps, that updating the state, understanding the state changed, and it's a lot. So
yeah.
All righty. Well, I'm gonna enjoy my day off. I don't know what you're gonna do.
I gotta work. I got a bunch of stuff that I gotta do. I'll be working, so I got a lot of update, I got a lot of work to do. So I'm gonna
end this.
I can't really talk about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm gonna end this stream. So this is all the bonus show you get. Oh, and you know what? For those who might be watching this stream, I don't know. I will upload the audio sometime.